These are more photographs that were taken by Jack Bick. These are the 9th Army Rangers. And just typical photographs. Yes, they did wear the makeup, as you see there, to be camouflaged in the jungle. And there were always, again, there was always kids around begging for candy or food or whatever. Those are really great photographs of the Rangers. There's some more back here that I can't really get to. It's the same bunch of guys that who were working there. This is marked as a Viet Cong burial flag. In reality, it's a Buddhist burial flag. It's meant to be carried vertically like this. We used to have it displayed horizontally. And there's a place where a flagpole would go right up that side. And I used to see them at a cemetery across the road from the base where I was stationed.
What were you saying? Oh, I was just saying that my dad did take a lot of pictures of the children there.
Oh, they were everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were cute.
He called them there were a few girls that were his Coca-Cola girls. They would bring him
Go
a
get
Coke.
him a black market Coke.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, this is called a tiger cage, and this is just a representation. There was all different kinds of these. Some of them were hanging in the jungle, many of them were built into the trees like this one is, this actual photograph here. I had a friend that was on a riverboat on the Mekong River. He said they used to find them in the edge of the river, never with anybody in them. He said if somebody had been in them, they would have been in the water up to their chin. And they were temporary holding cells that the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese armies used in South Vietnam because they had no infrastructure. They didn't have prisons. They had prisons in the north. When they captured one of our soldiers in the south, we put them in here, questioned them. If they were of any value, they would ship them in up north to the prisons. If they weren't of any value, they'd probably be killed. Down here is what's known as a punji pit. These were holes that were dug into the floor of the jungle along the trails, and they were usually 18 to 24 inches deep, and they would then be covered with twigs and grass and whatever to cover them up. And just the weight of your body, your foot breaking through that and plunging down on those sticks, it would go right through your foot. And those were sharpened bamboo sticks, very, very tough. I had a gentleman in here back in April that was looking at that, and I could tell he got upset. And I said, well, looks like you're pretty familiar with that. And he says, yes, I am. And he held up his hand. And he said, I had one go in here and come out here, one in here and out here. He had big scars on his back of his hand. And I said, well, if you can tell that story, I'd kind of like to hear it. And he said, yeah, I'll tell you. He said, I was an Army Ranger. I was being led out of a helicopter on a rope. It was a mountainside. And they couldn't get low enough, so I had to drop the last 10 feet. He said, I hit that mountain slope, and I just rolled down the mountain, and my hand ended up in that punji pit. He said, it happened instantaneously. And I said, that was just bad luck. He said, yeah, it was. And I said, well, in our survival training, they always told us that those would be covered in human excrement. He said, yes, they were. And I said, so did you get an infection? He says, yeah, by the time they got me medevaced out, my hand was the size of a basketball. But he had pretty much full use of his hand and seemed to be doing pretty well. This is about a gunship pilot named Anton who was shot down. He was actually shot down right here. And he tried to escape, and he was hiding out right here on this dike in the rice paddy when he was captured. And then he was held in this tiger cage down in this group of trees over here. They went back to rescue him because they knew where he was. And when they got there, he had already been moved up north. They were 2 days late. He'd been moved 2 days before. Okay. We'll move around here to our MIA POW section. And in here we've got pictures. We have a DVD that has interviews with a lot of the POWs' wives. We also have interviews with ex-POWs and guys that weren't POWs. But that's the bulk of this video is about POWs. This is a photograph. You might recognize the guy in the middle is a very young Ross Perot. And these wives, 2 of them were from Dallas, were going to Paris to try to meet with the North Vietnamese ambassador in Paris to find out what was happening to their husbands, because they didn't know if they were widows, if their husbands were captured, they had no idea. And the US government didn't want to talk about it, so they would not give them any information, tell them to go home and wait. Well, with the help of Ross Perot and some other people, they flew from Dallas to Paris and eventually got some information. It took a while, but they did get information about their husbands. This is a propaganda piece. And what they're trying to show is that this little girl with this rifle shot down this fighter jet, and this was captured this pilot. Well, there's a lot of things wrong with that story. Number one, he wasn't a pilot. He was on a helicopter crew that was shot down, and he was a POW. She had absolutely nothing to do with it. He's actually written a book about it. And she was standing by the side of the road as they were walking him by. They pulled her out and said, stand there, and they put a gun in her hand. They took this picture, and she had no idea why she was standing there. But they made a postage stamp out of it from the North Vietnamese postal system. Now, this is a replica of it. It's not the actual thing. Mr. Robinson survived and went back to North Vietnam in the 90s to try to find one of these stamps and could not find it. But at any rate, so over here, first of all, we have a portrait of Sam Johnson, local congressman who served both in Korea and in Vietnam. And on his second tour in Vietnam, he was shot down and was a POW for, I believe it was 7 years he was a POW. And for 6 of those years, or excuse me, for 5 of those years, he was in solitary confinement. So he's still our congressman this day, and is going to run again the next time, he says. These are copies of the letters from different Air Force pilots who watched people get shot down, and he knew the wife of this one guy, and in this letter, he just talks about, we know he made it safely to the ground, we saw him on the ground, we tried to rescue him, but the enemy fire was too heavy, we don't know if he's dead or alive, but he did make it safely to the ground. And this is a series of back and forth letters, and 2 years later, she finally gets a letter from her husband, saying he is alive, and he did survive, and he eventually comes home. All right, one of the things we wanted to build was a replica of what's known as the Hanoi Hilton. This was a prison that was built outside of Hanoi, well actually part of it was inside of Hanoi, actually by the French back in the 40s. And they used it for captured airmen. This gives you an idea of the size of the cell. And the light bulb, we know this is pretty accurate because we had original photographs. We had some original dimensions, and we talked to some guys that were actually POWs here. And on 2 different occasions, we had guys that were POWs at the Hanoi Hilton that said this was a little too accurate, and they actually had to leave. So we know. But
one of our local artists helped design it and build it.
Yeah.
Go stand in there. Feel how weird it.
Okay.
Just
and
uncomfortable.
All the steel work was made locally, and the light bulb is a 25-watt light bulb. It burned 24 hours a day. If there were any windows in the cell, they were bricked up. They had no windows. The shackles you see there were for the ankles and were used periodically for minor infractions like talking when you weren't supposed to or not bowing to the guard, something like that. And the bucket was the restroom. And they spent, what I understand, most of the, out of 24 hours a day, they were spending maybe 20 hours or more inside this cell. These are photographs of the actual Hanoi Hilton. So you can see we came pretty close, especially to the doors and the steel work. This is a double cell here. It's got 2 sets of shackles. But these are solitary cells we're showing here.